مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. هناك ما يعد ضربا من الجنون، وهناك ما ينافي العقل والمنطق، وهناك ما هو غير مسبوق، ثم هناك انتخابات 2020 الرئاسية. إذا كان اجتماع جائحة مروعة وكساد اقتصادي وتوترات أوركية، بالإضافة إلى تطرف كل من الجناح اليميني والجناح اليساري، لم يكن كافيا، فقد صارت حملتنا الرئاسية أكثر تأكيدا بوفاة روث بيدر جينزبرغ القاضية في المحكمة العليا. كانت بطلة في أعين ملايين الأمريكيين وزعيمة مجموعة القادات الليبراليين في المحكمة، وقد تحملت جينزبرغ مسؤولية كبيرة في التاريخ الأمريكي بالعمل على ضمان المساواة بين المرأة والرجل في الحقوق. بوفاتها قبل 6 أسابيع فقط من الانتخابات، قرر الرئيس ترامب السعي إلى ترشيح قاضية جديدة قد تؤدي الموافقة على تعيينها إلى تحول موازين القوى في المحكمة لصالح المحافظين، وهدفه كذلك هو إثارة حماس الناخبين الذين لا تعجب الكثير منهم كل سياساته، أو ربما لا يعجبهم هو شخصيا، ولكنهم يريدون أن يروا هي محكمة أكثر محافظة لأعوام كثيرة قادمة. كيف ستؤثر معركة المحكمة العليا على الانتخابات؟ هل لنا أن نتوقع مفاجآت أخرى في الأيام السابقة على الذهاب أمريكا للتصويت؟ لمناقشة هذه الأسئلة المهمة بشأن انتخاباتنا الرئاسية، يسرني أن أرحب بالصحفيين السياسيين المتميزين أليكس كليرفيلد وإلين غودفري وبرادلي بليكمان. Well, we're in the home stretch, in the final weeks of what has proven to be one of the most bitter, controversial, difficult, complicated, certainly unprecedented presidential elections in American history. We have just weeks to go before Americans complete their vote. Americans across the country have already begun to vote, but to complete the vote by November 3rd. To help us explain what is going to happen in these final days before the election, what variables may affect the ultimate outcome, I'm delighted to welcome Elaine Godfrey, Alex Clearfield, and Bradley Blakeman. So, Elaine, let's begin with you. Heading into the home stretch, how does it look on a national level?
Thanks for having me. It looks pretty wild right now at a national level. There are a lot of things happening in American politics right now, specifically 3 things that have happened recently sort of in this home stretch. The first is the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and her death has really heightened tensions in this race because Donald Trump will be replacing her, or hopes to replace her, with a conservative justice, and Democrats are calling that illegitimate and something that they really don't want to happen. So that has heightened tensions in the race. The second piece is the New York Times has released a collection of Trump's tax returns from the past few years, showing that in several years he paid nothing in federal income taxes. In 2 of the more recent years, 2016 and 2017, he paid $750, which is not very much compared to the average American taxpayer. And the third most recent thing is the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, which was an absolute mess. It was chaos. I don't know any voters who went in undecided who really had a clear picture of who they should be voting for at the end. So there's a lot going on right now in American politics.
So even with these 3 new variables into the election, Alex, the basic contours of the national polls seem to be unchanged for many months now. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you look at the national polling averages, Vice President Biden's had a pretty consistent lead of about 7 to 9 points in national polls, and that's endured for months now. It's endured through some of the worst days of the pandemic. It endured through both parties' conventions, which traditionally have given boosts to both candidates in past cycles, and it'll probably endure after the debate and after the revelations about President Trump's taxes. There have just been so many earth-shattering events in this election cycle, but Vice President Biden has maintained a very steady, very consistent lead.
So, Bradley, if Donald Trump is entering the final month of the campaign, still 7-9 points behind, according to national polls, what does he need to do in the final weeks to change this dynamic and come out on top?
Well, look, everybody should run like they're 10 points behind, because you shouldn't take anything for granted, assuming you believe the polls. And if we hearken back to the last election cycle between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, there wasn't any poll that had Donald Trump ahead. As a matter of fact, Democrats were anointing Hillary Clinton as the victor long before the first vote was cast. So I don't think there's too much to be read into these polls, especially in this election cycle with so much going on. But there are seminal moments to watch in the coming days. One, of course, was just mentioned, and that's the confirmation hearings for a new Supreme Court justice. That may change minds in America. There may be events that have yet to have happened. October surprises. I can't believe there are any more surprises that could happen, but I can assure you they will. That will have a direct effect on this election cycle. And I think the main thing that Republicans have to work on, and Democrats as well, is to get out the vote. Because of COVID, the voting has changed in many jurisdictions, the manner in voting, the timing of voting, how you do it, when you do it, and where you do it. That could affect the ultimate decision as to when a president will be declared. Could be months, could be weeks. So I think there are a lot of variables that need to be considered, but the most important for all candidates is the get out the vote effort, getting your people to the polls either in person or through an absentee ballot, which is mail, or a mail-in ballot unsolicited, which means that the ballots come to your home without request.
So let's take a look at a couple of these variables that were raised earlier on. Let's begin with the Supreme Court issue. Elaine, you mentioned the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Why did her death matter, and why is there such controversy about a president nominating a successor? Isn't that what presidents do?
Great question. It is what presidents do. It is what President Obama tried to do in 2016 when he nominated Judge Merrick Garland to the court. And that was, I believe, 9 months before the 2016 election when he nominated Merrick Garland. And Republicans refused to hold hearings or even meet with Judge Garland at the time, saying that in an election year, it was unfair for the president to choose a justice. They should let the election play out, and then the winner of that election would fill the seat on the court. So now we're in an election year when voters have already started voting. Actually, thousands of voters have begun voting. And Republicans are wanting to fill this Ginsburg seat. This is really frustrating for Democrats because they see it as hypocrisy. And the Republican justification is, well, we have the Senate, we have a Republican president. That wasn't the case in 2016. And so we should be allowed to fill the seat. But this is very frustrating for Democrats. And there's been talk of, what can the House do? What can the Senate do to pull out all the stops and prevent Trump's nominee from, getting a hearing at all, getting confirmed? And it turns out there's really not a lot anyone can do other than make a lot of noise.
So, Bradley, I've seen a lot of polling which suggests people generally think that Judge Barrett is a reasonable jurist. but they don't. But they do think that this is not fair play. That Republicans held up the last nomination. Fair is fair. You should wait until the Republicans, the country should wait till the next president or the clarity of our election to determine this. Why isn't that a reasonable position to hold?
Well, let's quote Barack Obama. I usually don't do that as a Republican, but I will in this case. Barack Obama said elections have consequences, and they do. And to the victor go the spoils of an election, which means that a president has the right, when he's elected, to do that which he has the power to do. When we go wrong in America, it's because we don't follow the Constitution. When we follow the Constitution, we don't seem to have mistakes made. Tradition has no value extraordinarily outside the Constitution. So it doesn't matter what tradition says. It doesn't matter what a handshake or a backslap means. What means something in America is the Constitution. The Constitution gives the power to the sitting president at any time during his presidency to fill a vacancy on the court, subject to confirmation of the Senate. It so happens that we have a Republican president and a Republican Senate. As pointed out, that was not the case in 2016 when the Republican Senate refused to give a Democratic president, Barack Obama, his choice for the Supreme Court. That's not the case here. So when we follow the Constitution, which Donald Trump has every right to do, as a matter of fact, I would say he must do as a president, then he must do his job. He must fill that vacancy. Now it's up to the Senate in order to confirm. If the votes are there, then she will sit as the next justice. If the votes aren't there, she won't, and it will go to the next president. But I can assure you, I'll make a prediction. Judge Barrett will be a justice of the Supreme Court by Election Day. That's my prediction.
Alex, earlier you said in passing you didn't think that this issue, even though it may have huge implications for decades of American jurisprudence, you don't think it's going to change many votes when it comes to November 3rd. Is that correct?
Well, one place where it could impact votes is in the Senate elections. The Senate, of course, is the body that will consider Judge Barrett's nomination and eventually vote whether or not to confirm her to the Supreme Court. There are a number of Republican senators in competitive states who really are kind of in a tough spot with this Supreme Court nomination. Someone like Cory Gardner in Colorado. Colorado is a pretty reliably Democratic state. He was facing an uphill battle for re-election even before this. He's said that he's fully on board with confirming Judge Barrett to the Supreme Court prior to the election. You know, some observers have said that that's something that quite possibly sealed his re-election loss. You could potentially say the same of Martha McSally in Arizona, a state that's been trending Democratic. Susan Collins of Maine has said that she does not think the Senate should consider the nomination prior to the election. She's also in a tough re-election battle. And then there are senators where we're really not sure how this will impact them. Someone like Tom Tillis in North Carolina. We've seen polling that shows North Carolina essentially tied to the presidential level, but Tillis has been trailing in the Senate race by a somewhat consistent margin. So rather than in the presidential race, I think where this could really make a difference is in some of these borderline Senate races, potentially in a way that helps Democrats, but could also help shore up Republicans in states that tilt towards the Republican side.
Very interesting. All right, when we come back after the break, we're going to take a look at that debate we recently had in just a moment. At a critical moment with the world watching, the president got sick. He came down with the same virus that had killed hundreds of thousands. The risk that it would count the president as another victim was real and serious. The president was Woodrow Wilson. The illness was the deadly Spanish flu, a pandemic which eventually killed 20 million people around the world, including 600,000 in the United States. And the incident had profound strategic consequences. Wilson fell sick while in France, negotiating with leaders of governments on the winning side of World War I to define the terms of what would become the Versailles Treaty. When he arrived, Wilson was hale and hearty, and he made powerful demands about self-determination for colonized peoples. His illness sapped him of strength and willpower, and in the end, he ceded ground on almost all of his famous 14 points. In the view of many historians, the flawed treaty agreed to in Paris laid the groundwork for the Second World War 20 years later. Today, a president's illness may impact the outcome of an election. A century ago, a president's illness probably affected the fate of human history. Our guests again today include Alex Clearfield. Alex is associate editor at the National Journal, one of Washington's most important and most nonpartisan publications. A native of New Jersey, he previously worked at CQ Roll Call. Also joining us is Elaine Godfrey. Elaine is an assistant editor at The Atlantic, one of America's leading magazines of news and ideas, where she covers national politics. A native of Iowa, she has also written for Real Clear Politics and New York Magazine. And Bradley Blakeman. Brad is an adjunct professor of public policy, politics, and international affairs at Georgetown University and former president of the conservative advocacy group Freedom's Watch. An attorney by training, he served in the White House under President George W. Bush as deputy assistant to the president and was also a close advisor to his father, President George H.W. Bush. All right, friends, let's take a look at debates. We just had one recently, which by all accounts was a political mess. Now, historically, what role do debates really play? Do they clarify issues for voters? Do they confuse voters? Do they ever actually have an impact on the outcome of an election? Elaine, let's start with you.
So that's an interesting question. I think debates do historically have at least a small impact on, how undecided voters might feel. It's a new setting to see a candidate to see them going head to head, to see them perform basically in front of an audience. In this case, the audience was much smaller due to COVID. But yeah, I think there is always a soundbite or an exchange or some tidbit that comes out of a debate that changes the game. This debate that we recently had, though, I would say was less educational for voters or instructive for any voters than it was noise for them. It was a lot of shouting, a lot of stress, and I think more than anything, this debate might have made voters not want to vote at all, or want to tune out of the whole process until November 3rd, which if they do, I can relate to that. So I don't know. There might be a small percentage that this debate affected, but I would say it was not as helpful as previous debates have been, for sure.
So, Brad, if you're on the president's campaign team, what was the best moment for you in that debate?
Well, the best moment was the best line, and that's really what you remember. You remember a soundbite. And that's the hope of the campaign, that you remember a soundbite, one sentence that really sums up what you want the debate to mean. To me, it was when the president said to Joe Biden, "I've done more in 47 months than you've done in 47 years," which was a comparison to what Donald Trump was able to do in a short time as president against somebody who's had a lifetime in politics. So that was the highlight. There weren't very many, I would say, on both sides. It was quite difficult to watch. If you really supported either candidate, you still support them. The question is, those people who are going to decide this election, which are swing voters and independents, what did they think? I will say this, it's probably when they get the ratings of how many people watched, it'll be something that would be absolutely amazing, that the millions upon millions of people, not only in our own country, but throughout the world, who actually tuned in. And by the way, just like we slow down to see an automobile accident, That's what's going to happen the next time. I think viewership will be even more because people want to see an accident occur.
My instinct is that we haven't seen the last new out of the blue variable to hit this election. And we have to stretch our imaginations around the world to try to imagine what that might be. But I want to thank you, Elaine Godfrey, Bradley Blakeman, and Alex Clearfield, for trying to explain to our viewers in the Middle East what just happened and what we can expect in the final weeks before the election. Thank you from Dakhel, Washington. A year of tragedy and catastrophe suffered another blow with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and someone who, in her 80s, became a national icon, a person Chief Justice John Roberts called a rock star. It's difficult to imagine the America in which Ruth Bader Ginsburg came of age, the America that she devoted her life to changing. It was an America in which women could not open a checking account or get a credit card, an America in which a woman could not get a mortgage on her own, an America in which being married was a barrier to employment, and America in which pregnancy was a legitimate reason to get fired, an America in which public universities could exist solely for men, an America in which the heads of the most prestigious colleges and universities, our leading law and medical schools, and our elite law firms, hospitals, and other institutions chafed at admitting women because it meant depriving a man of a seat, a degree, a position. She knew this firsthand, shamed by a dean and ultimately deprived of a job because she was a woman, even though she was always the smartest student and most capable lawyer in the room. Justice Ginsburg changed all that. As a brilliant legal mind, a highly effective attorney who won 5 of the 6 cases she argued before the Supreme Court, and as an exceptional jurist, a liberal who served 27 years on the Supreme Court, only the second woman ever appointed to the highest court of the land. With the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, I felt an intensely personal loss. She was my late wife's personal hero. She was a member of my synagogue. My rabbi, a close personal friend of mine, led memorial services for her in both the Supreme Court and the Capitol's Statuary Hall, the first time in American history that a woman and a Jew was given our country's highest honor of lying in state. It is no secret that Justice Ginsburg was not a fan of President Trump. She called him a faker. He, in response, called her a disgrace. It was 2 New Yorkers having it at each other, unusual only in that one was a judge, the other a politician. Her dying wish was that the winner of our November election choose her successor. Polls show that most Americans support that view. But it's not that view that matters. It's the president's view, and he has jumped at the chance to fill the seat now in the final days before the election. If his nomination is approved, another accomplished female jurist will fill the seat, but one with very different, very conservative views on many of the issues that mattered most to her. For Ruth Bader Ginsburg, cruel irony indeed. As we say in my faith, may her memory be a blessing. Bahava nasilu nehayat hadhihi halka min barnamij Dakhel, Washington. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول الإسهامات التاريخية التي قدمتها روث بيدر جينزبرغ للدور المرأة في أمريكا، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاج Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل وإلى أن ألقاكم. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.